Since the arrival of the European explorers in 1492, there has been obviously many, many changes to indigenous peoples. There's been struggles of warfare, climate change, disease, oppression, displacement, continued violence on indigenous peoples. We were looked at and are looked at even today, which I want to make sure that I press this point is that the discussion of the doctrine of discovery does not come up enough. And we were labeled under this doctrine of discovery. We were uncivilized, we were savages. And the only way that we could be civilized was through Christian conversions, whether it was through the Spanish Catholics or to the English Protestants. Remember that the United States, and specifically in the US, the indigenous peoples gave up about 95% of the land, or they didn't give it up. They were forced, coerced, treaty signing. Many of them, of course, were killed and murdered. And nearly all those treaties, I would say about 98% of them have been violated by the United States government. But going back to the doctrine of discovery, the Indian Removal Act of 1830, which was the Trail of Tears for the Cherokee, came from the actual writings from the doctrine of discovery. Manifest destiny took place. Indigenous peoples were forced west into what is now called Indian Territory, or was then called Indian Territory, and then some people still refer it to this day. But it was important at the time to kill the Indian and save the man, according to Richard Pratt, who was a captain with the U.S. military. He was the one who started the boarding schools for Native people. So we move forward today, and we still see those impacts of colonialism, forced relocation, disease, violence, and today we see the results of extreme poverty. Many indigenous peoples, unfortunately, suffer from that, and that is seen through whether it's through malnutrition or access to water, or lack of access to water, good soil, education, healthcare, and levels of high unemployment. We still see that today. We also see our lands continually being under attack. Those that are living on reservations are subject to corporate interest and multinational corporations that continue to displace indigenous peoples because they find lithium, coal, or timber, or even water here in the Southwest. So many indigenous peoples still frequently face and are victims of ecological racism and environmental destruction in many areas. Today, most indigenous peoples or most Native American people here in the United States live off the reservation. Many of them, because unemployment is so high on reservations, many of them leave the reservation to try to find a better way of living. The last thing that I touch on is the stereotypical view of Native people. So if I were to Google Native American or American Indian, you're going to get a picture of some headdress wearing Indian guy from the 1900s. So many of them, many of Americans still see us as in the past. So we are seen as mascots, or the narrative of Native people is written by the conqueror. And so Native people are seen of that in the past. We are stereotypical ways we're portrayed are the medicine man or the princess, someone like Pocahontas, who is considered a good Native or a good Indian. The media continues to focus on stories that, or a lot of times they don't. But they don't, they'll address poverty, and they'll talk about casinos, and somehow correlating those two to be interconnected. And in many ways they are, but Native people, there are many nations. There are 576 federally recognized tribes in the United States. Many of them do not have casinos. And if they do, many of those are not near major metropolitan areas where you would see a large influx of um, patrons in those casinos. So today we still fight many, many issues. Our lands are still being encroached upon. Our rights are still being violated, our spiritual and our human rights. We are made fun of, or we are seen as caricatures in the eyes of America.